So first things to be said is hello and welcome to this month's The Contact Center Network event. And I've got a very exciting feeling about this one because we've got two awesome speakers. We've got Harriet Davies who's joining us, and we've got Tracy Finlay who's joining us, and both are a hoot. And they're both very well informed about digital, human and communication styles. So I'm sure we're going to have some really good conversation. But as ever, these things only work really, really well if you guys, as part of the audience, participate and join. So we're looking forward to hearing some of your questions, some of your comments and some of your experiences as part of today's session. So I'm going to share my screen very quickly and just do the usual intro into the Contact Center Network. So yep, we set this up at the first part of lockdown back in March-ish 2020. And I keep saying, as long as people keep booking on, as long as people keep turning up, I am happy and prepared to continue to run the sessions. And there's so many great speakers out there and so many lots of different things to talk about when it comes to contact centers that we could go on for 10 years doing this thing. You never know, but these are just some of the things that we talk about in some of these sessions. So typically we focus on how can we improve customer experience. That's one of my missions as part of Fab Solutions, is to change customers' perceptions of contact centers through delivering awesome customer experiences. And what we try and do within these sessions is talk about things that are on this wheel. So we talk about people, process, leadership and technology, because they're all important parts of driving a really great customer experience. So today we're talking about all things digital. So we're sitting in that kind of sector there under the tech quadrant. And really we're trying to kind of understand a little bit as to what the whys and wherefores are of the digital experience. So I've used a couple of expressions in terms of the pitfalls, the bear traps and the best practice that we can get within that digital customer service journey. So how are we doing that? We're going to be doing that through having the two speakers that we've got on today. But I want you guys to share, what do you think is the biggest challenge in perfecting the digital journey? I want to understand a little bit about what kind of things get in the way, if it's your own personal journey or if it's an experience that you had that makes it particularly clunky. So if you've not familiarized yourself with the chat should be in the middle of your screen. And I just wanted to drop into the chat hashtag challenge so we can pull them out really easily. But share in the chat, what do you think is the biggest challenge in perfecting the digital customer journey? And we'll see what types of things come through. And what we'll do is we'll use some of these later when we come to the Q&A, and we'll pull out some of those comments and we'll see if we can tackle some of those challenges and maybe bust a few myths and breed a little bit of best practice as we go through. So we've got a jam-packed agenda. So we've got the session that we're in now, which is the welcome and networking. So do feel free to share your LinkedIn links into the chat. So if there's people that you don't know on here, get to know them, connect with them, share experiences. My one caveat to that is please don't force products and services down people's throats. This is a networking event. It's not a sales pitch. So please don't do that. So we do have two great panelists though, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves very, very shortly. And then after the panelists have shared their value, we're going to go into a little bit of a Q&A. So if you've got any particular burning issues, or if you've got any topics that you want to talk about, or if you've got a question for either of the panelists and or me, drop it into the chat and we'll make sure that we get some answers to that. So it might be about a journey that you're going through with your own kind of digital transformation, or it might be an experience that you've shared through somebody else's that you might want to kind of share and see how we can get things right. And then there's an opportunity to connect with the wider Contact Center Network group. And then I'm going to give you a sneak preview as to who is the next guest for next month's event. But before we do that, say hello and welcome. So where are you, Tracy and Harriet? Give us a wave. Say hello to Tracy and Harriet, who are going to be our guest speakers today. And they're going to be sharing some of their kind of hints and tips as to how to optimize the digital journey and things to take into consideration when you're looking at that kind of experience. And I've known Tracy and Harriet for a little while now, and they are both awesome people. So I think they'll share some really valuable nuggets of information. But before we do that, let's take a look at the digital landscape. it's changed significantly in the last 18 months alone. And the question there, with an ever changing landscape, what's next? So let's just kind of look at some of the things that have come out of the landscape over the last 18 months. And one of the things we've seen, and this is a report that came from Kinsey, is the digital journey has accelerated at more than 7 years pace. So we're actually 7 years forward as to where we would have expected to be. Who would have thought that maybe 18 months ago, when we hadn't even heard the word self-serve or chatbot or good chatbot, more to the point. And so we've accelerated the pace at 7 years, and that brings with it a whole host of things in terms of brand impact. And 77% of consumers say that the digital brand has changed due to the pandemic. But the important part from that stat, whilst 77% of consumers are saying that, only 18% of consumers are actually saying that they want to interact digitally with a brand. Now, I don't believe that's because they're steadfast in their ways. I think that is part of the process of how organizations, how contact centers present themselves digitally. And what we'll talk about later on, we'll talk with Harriet and with Tracy, is how we can optimize that journey so that it becomes a journey that consumers want to engage with more effectively. And then we've also got digital adoption. This was an interesting stat from I think it was Salesforce, and it was businesses are 3 times likely to say that at least 80% of their customer interactions are likely to be digital in nature going forward. Now that's a significant shift as to where we might have been perhaps 18 months ago, 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, in that we were primarily saying that we're always saying voice is going to be the channel of choice. Actually, that is changing, and the digital journey and the digital interaction is changing significantly. And that's been enabled in a lot of respects by cloud adoption. So more than 3 in 4 contact centers have made a full or partial move into the cloud. And that brings with it a whole host of technology options that we can either embrace really well, or we can embrace with a bit of a hit and hope. So we've got to make sure that that kind of adoption, that cloud technology is used in the best possible way. And when we look at that kind of change, and this probably explains why some of the journeys that we're seeing are a little bit clunky at the moment, is 68% of those migrations into the cloud have happened in the last 18 months during the height of the pandemic. So some significant shift in behavior, some significant shift in technology that might have been driven by need rather than planning and execution, which Harriet is going to talk to us about in just a few minutes. And I thought this one was really, really interesting. It was some studies that were done that showed that chatbots, and it'd be interesting to see what people think on this one, is that chatbots will eventually handle between 40 to 80% of common customer service inquiries. Whether they do that 40 to 80% well remains to be seen. But I thought I'd share with you some of the landscape for the digital journey at the moment, and where some of that change has happened over the last 18 months before we lead into Harriet's section, which is going to talk to us about some of the best practices that we've got within the digital customer journey. So that was a very whistle-stop tour of what the digital landscape is looking like. If you found that useful, pull out your key stat in the chat. But what that does is it enables us to lead nicely as a very seamless segue into our first guest panelist of the day, which is Harriet Davies. And Harriet runs her own business, and she's also very recently a new addition to Fab Solutions as part of the digital transformation journey. So really happy to be working with Harriet. And I'm going to shut up talking, and I'm going to hand over to you, Harriet. So take it away. The stage is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. So I've got some slides for you today. So hopefully you can see my screen.
Certainly can.
Brilliant. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me today, Gary. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Harriet. I'm a digital transformation and platform specialist, and I mostly work with traditional financial services firms. And I think that's just because there's a lot of work to do there that I've been quite lucky to work with that audience a lot. But what I wanted to do today was to share some of my top tips for your digital change project. And these tips apply whether it's a big digital transformation or a small digital improvement or enhancement that you're making. And I've tried to put a bit of an angle on it of the sort of changes that are going to enhance, sorry, the chat flash there, of the changes that are going to help you digitalize your customer journeys. So before we jump into the top 6 tips that I'm going to share with you today, I want to introduce you to something called the ACE framework. And this is the methodology that I use for any digital change project that I work on. And the ACE framework is essentially 3 steps. It's assess, change, evaluate. And these are the 3 phases that any digital project will go through. And you'll notice that they run around in a circle because you do all the work up front to identify the project, you make the change, you evaluate, and then you're probably going to end up needing to go back through the cycle, hopefully, to continuously improve what you've delivered. There's a lot that sits underneath each of those 3, your project. And the one that I could talk all day about is assess, because I'm personally guilty of this, but I know it's very easy to jump straight into the very exciting design and delivery of your project or system or change or digital journey, but doing the work up front can really help ensure your success. And I'm sharing this with you because the tips I'm going to share are actually spread into each of the 3 phases. So no matter where you are within your current journey, hopefully there's something in there to help you.
Yeah, all right. No need to knock you, all right.
Just, if you wouldn't mind putting yourself on mute while Harry's talking, that'd be awesome. Cheers. There's some great Irish tones in the background.
No, but
Thank
I'll
you.
have a spare one here. Where's that one? I'll swap that over. Thank you.
Go, mute would be great.
I'm all right, bud, you.
Thank you. Okay.
There we go.
Good. All right, so let's get into the tips. So the first one is within the assess phase. And as I mentioned, this phase is really all about setting yourself up for success. So the first piece of advice that I could give anyone who's thinking about starting a digital transformation project, and even if you've started, you may need to go back and do this, is to analyse where you are now. And what this means is practice is getting into the detail of all of your current processes, your user journey, your MI and data, to really identify your strengths and your weaknesses. I recently worked with a client who described their customer services team as like a swan. And the reason that she used that analogy was that on the surface, they had this beautiful online journey that advisors and customers could use to submit business. And it looked like you were submitting it all straight through, and it was a lovely, shiny, polished set of screens. But what was happening in the background was that they had nearly 40 manual workarounds and a very small number of automated letters. And the letters that were automated were actually being QC checked because they didn't always come off right. So she was describing her team as a swan because they had this lovely, elegant top, but underneath the surface, they were frantically paddling away, trying to keep up with the current and keep things moving. And the reason that they'd found themselves in that situation is that they'd done a digital transformation program, but they'd taken their existing process that they had today and really just built an online screen that took someone through that process. And the real challenge that they were seeing was all of those little flaws and challenges and issues that they had in the bank office process were just really accelerated by putting it online because they were seeing more traffic. They were losing the manual touch of their very amazing agents who could improve things and just tweak it so it looked better. But they were also making things more visible to customers. So they found themselves in a little bit of a difficult situation. And that's a very extreme situation. Hopefully none of you have that number of manual workarounds that you're currently dealing with. If you do, let's have a chat. But it really goes to show that doing the work up front to really understand your areas of weakness and what you really don't want to be building online is such a great activity to do. The second tip that I wanted to share with you today is engage, engage, engage. So this is all about managing expectations and communicating often, particularly with your front-end team and their line managers. And within this, a really great activity to do is to actually work with representatives of your front-end team to define what I would call your principles. And these principles can be anything like, we really don't want any more manual workarounds, and all of the letters that you produce need to be automated, for example. But it could also be things like, we don't want it to take more than 5 minutes for a customer to submit an application to us. a new business application, for example. And working with your frontline team is going to really help you define great principles, because they're the ones that deal with the customers on a daily basis. There was a really interesting McKinsey study done called The People Power of Transformation. It's quite old now. The stats get quoted a lot because they're quite shocking, but they basically said that less than 30% of transformation projects are successful. It was around 28%. And what was really interesting in that article was that if of the projects where frontline staff and line managers were not included or engaged in the project, that success rate fell to just 3%. Now, I think that we need to take that with a pinch of salt, and I'm sure that there's great project management people out there that will be like, no way, it's better than that. But it just really goes to show that it makes such a big difference to engage the right people early and to keep them involved, because they really do know best what your customers want and need, especially for digitalizing a customer journey as well. So on to the change phase, and this is all about designing and delivering your customer journey in this case, or any sort of digital change that you're running. So the third tip is to define how you will measure success, and to do that as early as possible, because you want to be really clear about your objectives and start thinking about the data that you need early, so that you don't get to the end of your project and think, how many people are using the system? How many people are dropping off? Is it good? Is it not? And by defining the data early, you make sure you get it. And one of the other great things about defining objectives is that it helps engage your customer services teams as well. And those objectives should be things that are a bit more about the objectives of the end user. So yes, objectives of saving money or increasing sales or customer experience scores, they're all great. But those objectives could also be things like how long it takes to open an account, as I mentioned. And there's a really big metric that's been going around on LinkedIn and things for a while now about the number of clicks it takes to open a bank account. And I think that's really interesting, because the lowest number of clicks is actually Revolut with 24 clicks. And the highest, I think, was First Direct with 120. Now, when you look at those stats, it looks really quite bad on the sort of traditional banks. And those are the kind of objectives that you can set for yourself. Maybe not number of clicks, maybe that's right, but it could also be things like the time it takes or the way that you feel. As long as you set it early and think about how you're going to measure it, they're all valid objectives for your program as well. So the fourth tip is to look at the way your processes fit together. Now, from the challenges that I'd seen in the chat before I started sharing my screen, I did see a couple about sort of speaking to a different team, or you've got to go speak to someone else, or being passed from a bot to a person and having to re-explain your whole scenario. And that is a great example of why this step is such an important one within your digital transformation journey. So I would say that one of the key areas to try and get right are any points where your customer journey crosses from online to offline. So going from system to person, for example. And those chat scenarios that you've shared in the group are a perfect example of this. Another example is a beautiful ad hoc crystallization journey that for a pension provider that I was working with. And they designed this wonderful online journey that an advisor could submit online, but they didn't look at the finance processing. And actually, to get your tax-free cash took a really long time because of the sell down and the backs process and things. But if they'd looked at the two processes together, they'd have seen that the existing back office processes were really just undoing all of the hard work that they'd done to make the front part so slick and wonderful. So this tip, I would say, if you are looking for any quick wins, ways to improve customer service or your online journey, take a look at places where they transition from offline to online, and there will be really great quick wins for you to enhance your digital journey. This tip, nearly there, is to take a step back from the tech delivery. So it can be very easy, and it's absolutely right to focus on the technology. So your user stories, doing all your testing, fixing your defects, but your people are going to be absolutely essential to the success of your transformation. If you have a great system, but your teams can't support customers to use it, then your uptake probably isn't going to be great, and you're still going to carry on with the back office manual approach. But if you have a terrible system and you've got great customer services who are on board and able to support, it actually makes it less of a disaster. So engaging with your teams, not only at the beginning, but all the way through as well, and taking a step back to assess your business readiness activity as early as possible is going to set you up to be in a really great position. I very often see projects where you get to the end and you've shortened user acceptance testing because there were delays and defects, and now suddenly we've got to train everybody. And I can tell you from personal experience that I learned very early in my career is that it's much easier to write FAQs on knowledge bank content while you're designing the solution, rather than getting to the end and panicking and trying to remember all the questions that you asked and all the things that would be helpful to know. So the fifth tip is to start your business readiness activity as early as possible and be thinking about the people all the way through. And then lastly, in the evaluate phase. So just to end on a bit of a negative note here, is that there will be plenty of improvement opportunities, aka failures. So things will take time. With all the best will in the world, there will always be things that you could do better for your organisation, for the people, your actual customers. A pandemic might hit and suddenly what you were designing doesn't quite work as you had hoped. And one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to set up a fast response team as you go live, sometimes called a crisis team, but I think that's a little bit dramatic. But what a great team would look like is representatives from different business areas. So yes, IT and information security, but also customer services, marketing, sales, depending on what the journey is that you've launched. And those guys should essentially be on call whenever there's some feedback, or if there's a failure or something goes really wrong, then they can respond immediately, because it's not necessarily about nothing going wrong. It's about responding in the best way when it does. Just to recap, 6 top tips for you today. Analyze where you are now and just take the time to do that up front. Engage early and often with people across the entire organisation, but especially the frontline guys who are going to be dealing with whatever it is you put live in reality. Define how you're going to measure success early and make sure that you've got the data that's going to be available to back that up. Take a look at the way your processes actually fit together, especially where you go from online to offline. Take a step back from the tech delivery every now and again to focus on your business readiness and your people delivery. And then lastly, remember that there's going to be plenty of improvement opportunities for you. And that's why the ACE framework is a circle and not a straight line. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Harry. You know, there's some awesome things going live in the chat. So I thought whilst we've got you here, and whilst we've got Tracy here as well, we'll ask a few of those questions before we transition into Tracy. So we'll ask a couple before I then tee you up, Tracy. So this is your 60-second warning to prepare yourself. I thought there was some really great questions from Oliver. So Oliver cited a challenge within that. He's saying, how do you try and replicate positive CSAT through telephony channels in purely digital journeys? So Oliver, do you just want to take yourself off of mute? Ask your question, Oliver.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Yeah, it's certainly a challenge that we're experiencing at the moment, where generally our telephone journeys get great feedback from customers, and our digital journeys less so. We need to find that sweet spot, and that's a big challenge for us at the minute. We don't want to be pushing customers to channels and end up worse off overall in terms of customer experience. So I'd be interested in any thoughts or any advice that we might really use to help us.
Harry, I'll come to you first.
Sure. So I think this is a really difficult one and quite a common situation. So with digital transformation, I think we talk a lot about internal culture change and things, but actually the challenge is also the external culture and what the customers have come to expect. And I would also probably say that digital transformation and offering digital journeys doesn't mean getting rid of the traditional sort of telephone lines, unless that's your particular objectives. But it is about kind of finding the balance of where does it add value and make it easier for the customer to do it online. But actually, if your telephone conversations are still adding a lot to the customer experience and you don't personally have an objective to get rid of them entirely for whatever reason that might be, there is nothing wrong with still maintaining traditional sort of telephone channels as well. One of the things that I found kind of helpful in the past is doing some training sessions with the kind of agents to give them some wording that they can use to start to educate customers on other options. Like, did you know this would be quicker if you did it online? Probably worded better than that by a marketing professional, but just start slowly educating them that they have other options and it might be faster without making them feel like frustrated because there's no other option.
I think that's a really good point, that, Harriet. And I was chatting to somebody who was doing some voice of the customer work, and this will kind of feed into the point that Oliver's making, I think, and it's understanding what are those key points within that online journey where they're experiencing the biggest pain. So where's the volatility within that NPS? And actually, I suggested, when was the last time you actually walked your own digital journey, and how did you experience it from a customer's perspective, to then say, right, actually, this is really clunky, or this is taking a load more clicks than maybe it should do. So I think it's probably analysing where the positives are in your human interaction in that particular journey, correlating that with the online journey, and then seeing if there is a process pinch point within the online journey that might be driving more of the negative dissatisfaction. Tracy, what do you think from that perspective? Do you think there's anything else to add there?
Well, I can imagine that Oliver's got quite a challenge with often the exec board wants stats. So I'm sure he's got the challenge where we want to see, some data around it. The great thing is your next contact centre network has the lovely Paul Banks on it, and I'm sure Paul, who's here today in the audience, will have plenty to say on this as well. There are some great things like sentiment analysis. You've got AI, machine learning. You can throw all sorts of money at getting sentiment data from these things, but there are so many things that still irk me with a lot of the KPIs and things that contact centres do that don't result in firm action and really, really great outcomes. And I've always had a little bit of a beef with NPS because I've been part of so many meetings where people talk about, well, we were 85% and now we're 84%, and nothing comes from it, and it doesn't change anything. The thing that I love more than anything is customer behaviour. So if you're watching their behaviour and you're watching other outcomes and you're seeing where the customers are behaving, customers' behaviour will tell you more than anything about what you're doing well and what you're doing badly. And also you've got the customer facing team, and I can never overemphasize the importance of these people. They know your customers more than your customers know your customers, and I feed into them constantly. So when it comes to stats, there are various things that you can do, but it takes investment. But when it comes to actually making tangible changes based on how your customers feel, your customers will tell you through their behaviour, exactly whether or not they like or don't like what they're doing, in so many different ways in what they say and what they do.
Great shout, that, Tracy. I'm going to come to you with this next question from John Chapman, and then we're going to launch into your presentation for today. So, John, I'd just like, if you still take yourself off mute and fire your question at Tracy, because I think this is a good behavioural one.
Hi, Tracy. So from our point of view, we're an insurance company, so people only get in touch with us if they want to change something or something's gone wrong. So we have our portals, we have our bots, we have everything, but it always seems to be simpler to call us because that's the way they do it. So it's how do we change that sort of behaviour and make it easier, or make it in their minds easier to contact us through the portal rather than do it themselves rather than call us?
There is still very much a strong view with customers. When I say customers, I say all of us, people. I do a lot of polls on LinkedIn, and I post every single day about behaviours, and a lot of what I do involves a poll. And I did one recently about chatbots, and people have a perception that chatbots are awful. It was, I can't remember the results, but it was a resounding, we hate them. It takes us round in circles. So there is this assumption that if you give customers the choice, they will opt to call, because customers think that's the best solution, and in many cases it's not the best solution. And if you really boil down to what customers, we all really want, is A, we would rather that problem, we didn't have to contact you in the first place. B, we would, increasingly customers want to self-serve, and a lot of them just don't realise they want to self-serve. And so if you give them the choice, they will opt to speak to a person, regardless of how great your self-serve process is. I mean, we've all been on the IVRs, sat in queue, and it says, if you would like more useful information and answers to frequently asked questions, please go to www. And if you were to actually look at how many people drop out at that point, it's probably zero. So I always see that bit of information as pointless, because of people's recent experience of bots, because of people's experience with frequently asked questions, they're usually not that great in a lot of cases. So it's a perception thing. So if you give people the choice, they will always choose to speak to a person. So I would redesign that bit so that the choice is taken away from them.
And I think this.
Sorry, Tracy, you just said there it's a perception, but is it the reality of experience?
It's
rather
the
than
reality of their experience with other businesses.
Yes,
yeah.
and I think
So
that's the issue.
It's not
There's
your
so many
fault.
bad.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
There's
so
so many
poor
implementations out there.
Yes. And so that I would really focus on that very first bit. So are you giving them the option of one or the other?
We have been. We are driving it down and trying to remove phone numbers from Google and things. We're not trying to stop.
Oh, they'll always find it. Yeah, and actually, customers don't trust a business who tries to hide their telephone number. So that's probably not the best approach. I would really think about carefully designing that very first bit, and it's all about reassurance, and they need to see before, because there's a perception out there, and it's probably right, is that once you go down that self-serve route, you'll be stuck in a loop and you can't get out of it, and then you have to start all over again. That's what's in their heads when they look at that screen and says you can either go down self-serve or you can call us. They'll always go call pretty much every time. I'd rather just call and speak to a person. And when I did those surveys on LinkedIn, of which, you know, they got hundreds and hundreds of votes, there was a resound, all the comments and everything, resounding message came across that they don't trust self-serve because it's been done so badly across the board. Even the biggest organisations been done so badly that they will go, I don't trust it, ring. I don't trust it, ring. So it's the choice that's the problem.
Thank you.
Yes, a really important one. It's rise of customer choice, as I said in one of the posts I did. Give them the option. But don't, I think, deceive. I think that's the key point.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because we want to work with how they would like to contact us as well. Yes, we want to drive them towards the self-serve, but we don't want to take that option away from calling us. You know, so it's a difficult one to get right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would strongly recommend you don't try and hide that phone number, because they will find it and they will go to great lengths to find it.
Yeah.
And they will ring anyway.
We were Googling complaints.
Yeah, we were hoping it would be more that the people who don't really need to call us, they might find it easy and think, oh, it's less hassle, we'll go online. Whereas the people who really need us will still find us, and that's fine. And that's what we're trying to think. But yeah, I take your point.
Great example of that, John. Thanks very much for sharing. Tracy, we'll come to you now for your session. So I'll hand over to you. Take it away.
Okay, my name's Tracy Finley. What I deliver is talented, motivated teams and great customer experiences. What I do is behaviours. I have spent pretty much all of my adult life as my own lab rat. I question loads and loads of outcomes, especially stuff that keeps on going wrong for decades. And those of you that are out there that have worked in contact centres for a long time, like I have, will see that people are talking about the same things that they were talking about 20 years ago. There are so many things that just can't be fixed. That's because it involves people. So everything I do is really a hybrid of my personal experiences of leading teams. I started off as a contact centre agent, so I know the challenges that lie with a contact centre agent. You know, I started a long old time ago. And everything I do is a hybrid of my experiences, my making mistakes and feeling the pain of those making mistakes. And also I listen to thought leaders, but I don't just listen to thought leaders on contact centres or customer experience. I also follow people like Tony Robbins, which talks about motivation. So I'm all about what motivates people, what drives people to behave in certain ways. And I will even study wonderful people like Esther Perel, who talks about infidelity and eroticism in committed relationships.
Keep it clean, Tracy. Keep it clean.
Because
show.
But it's important because these are like the major challenges that we're all facing in everyday lives. So I don't just stick to one thing. And when I listen to people like Esther Perel, I'm learning about motivation. I'm learning about the need for instant gratification. And so when we are going through a customer journey, 96% of everything that we do and that drives all of our actions is driven by the subconscious. And when I listen to governments, when I listen to businesses, when I listen to the people that comment on my posts, people talk about logical, rational things like, well, if they're behaving in that way, then we need to educate them. But actually, if that was the answer, people wouldn't overspend, people wouldn't put weight on. We all know how not to overspend. We all know how not to get into debt. But people continue to do it in great numbers. So we have to look much, much more deeply. I've been running my consultancy for over 10 years now, and most of what I do is with contact centres, but because I do behaviours, it's starting to bleed out into other things, and people are even asking me to rewrite their LinkedIn profiles and talk about how to get great engagement from LinkedIn posts. So it's all behaviours, it's all motivation, and that's what drives me. So I've been looking at for years over the customer experiences, and I've been looking at the repeated mistakes that causes customers to do things that you probably wouldn't want them to do. And of course, much more recently, that's taken me into the digital world. Digital technology can give you almost any experience you want. It is amazing. Bots are amazing. AI is amazing. Machine learning is amazing. But it all seems to go wrong at the point of implementation. And I think that's because so many contact centres are still trying to tweak the old ways. They're still trying to say, let's improve the queuing experience. Whereas my view is, why isn't the goal, we need to stop people from having to contact us in the first place. I often talk about customer needs versus customer expectations. I spent years looking at customer needs, and then I realized actually these are the same set of three needs. They're the same set of needs for your staff, will need the same thing from a leader, and your partner will still need the same set of three things, and your kids will be looking for the same things. So human needs, not just customer needs, human needs, I've distilled it down to three things. Do I like and trust you? Do I matter to you? Will you make my life better? Those are the three subconscious questions that keep going through our minds with every single interaction. So if you satisfy those three needs with every customer interaction, then you can't go wrong. If you keep on saying, we're making this decision, does that mean that our customers will like and trust you? Like and trust us? Does it mean that they will feel that they matter to us? And does it make them feel that we will make their lives better? So those are the three customer needs. They never change because they are fundamental human needs. When it comes to the modern customer expectations, those are, will you understand my real needs, and will you treat me as an individual, and will you communicate with me where I am, not where you are? And we've seen this massively in the pandemic. So all of a sudden you had this massively long queue, and you also had a rise in email. So we were still, businesses, regardless of their size, and I keep on saying this, budget is not the barrier to getting great customer experiences. Know-how is the barrier. They were still forcing people down a certain route, and actually that's not where people were having the conversation, so that wasn't happening. So what I've done is I've actually taken some of Harriet's great headlines, and I just want to add a few bits to it. So where Harriet said, analyze where you are now, really look at your customers' behavior. And as I said before, your people, your customer facing people, they often don't realize how much they know. I will often, when I first start with a business, regardless of the size, before I take them down the, if they're going to go down the digital route, great, we can do that all really, really well. But actually you can do this with no budget. And what you do is you get your customer facing people in a room and you make them really passionate. And the way to do that is to say, what really annoys you about your customers? Now, if you've ever spoke to a customer facing team, you will hear, regardless of what you want them to do, they will moan like hell about customers are always doing really stupid things. They keep on asking this question. They keep on doing that. We've told them they need to do that. They've had a letter that says that and they still won't do it. That's because customers are driven by the subconscious, like we all are. So if you get a whole load of things, annoying, stupid things that customers say, that's all your fault. As a business, everything that your customer does that is unhelpful is driven by the things that you say and the things that you do. So things like hiding the telephone number, they will find a way around it. If you find out through your people the way your customers are behaving, then straight away you've got an amazing roadmap on things that you need to fix, because you can bet your bottom dollar if customers are doing unhelpful things, it's the business's fault. So the next one, engage. So that was really involve your customer facing people, because they are just amazing. I just love them. Define how you measure success. Businesses, and I can tell by when as a customer, I can tell that when a lot of businesses have implemented a bot, or when they've done web chat, anything that's digital, they've started off with their own needs. And I can see that as much as they say that customers are at the heart of everything they do, I can tell that, all these experiences that people talk about and that you've experienced, that will be because they have been driven by, we need to cut costs. But actually, if you start with customers, and if you start with the people stuff, so you do great things for your customers, and so if you start with that, then the outcome is that your people will be more motivated and you will cut costs. Because if you are matching customers' needs all the time, then you will cut costs. You just will. And so it's more of an outcome than a goal. And actually you need to start thinking about new KPIs, average handling times. I am so excited about the future of the customer service agent role, because actually if you automate the churn and you leave your customer facing people to have the conversations that are meaty and the really deep and stuff that really needs a good knowledge, then their jobs can be much more motivational. So I'm really excited about what technology can do for the people, for the agents. And with there will be plenty of improvement opportunities. There's no end game. When you implement technology, it's a whole game of if then. Your customers will adapt their behavior to what you've done. They will, which is why I'm not a fan of surveys, because surveys will say, based on what we're already doing, what do you think? And actually, what you're already doing may not be the right thing. Why do your customers need to sit and wait? If somebody had told you what customer service was 30 years ago, and it says, actually, we're going to expect every one of our customers to sit and wait patiently while we find time for an answer. Not every question. Oh God, I've got an Amazon delivery about to come to the door, so I do apologise. There you go. I'll have to ignore him. And so if you are constantly looking and you make one person responsible for the success of customer behaviour, then you cannot lose. So it's constant learning. So my top tips, so if I was to give 5 top tips really, really quickly, Gary, the first one will be stop talking like a contact center. People implement bots that sound like a contact center. Sorry to keep you waiting, an agent will be with you shortly. We apologize for any inconvenience caused, that's my pet hate. If you take, I'm sure every one of you could list the top 5 contact center cliches. Stop using them. There are a million and one other ways to word it when you sound like a human. So that's tip number 1, stop sounding like a contact center. The next one will be, if your goals are customer led, then business benefits are an outcome. Third one is involve your customer facing staff every step of the way, but don't just tell them, ask them and ask for their views, because that's great for motivation. And then the final one is never, ever, ever stop reviewing. Just constantly keep reviewing and make one person responsible for that, for the success of your customers' behavior. I'll shut up now, okay?
If you need to get your delivery, you can go and get your delivery now. I think there's some really good questions in the chat though, so we're going to use the last 10 or 12 minutes just to ask some of those things to the panelists. And I want to come to Rhiannon first, because you had a question that I thought was very kind of behavioural / process driven. So let's see where Tracy and Harriet can take that. So Rhiannon, ask your question.
Thank you. Yeah, this is my personal experience. How do we deal with customers that kind of, I know what my problem is and I just need someone to do this, but the chatbot or the digital channel makes you go through a series of questions because that's the funnel they want you to go through. How can we either make customers go through that funnel or build something that's far more intuitive?
Harriet, that's probably a great one for you.
Harriet first, just from a process perspective. What's the best way to tackle that, Harriet? And then I think the other part is probably more of a ask the right question and get the right answer that Tracy might be able to glean some light on. So Harriet, you go first.
Yeah, so I think we're going to build on something that Tracy just said. It's not really the customer's fault. It's yours as a business, and it probably means that your funnel is not working as well as it should. So obviously, as someone who designs and writes a lot of processes, my advice is going to be remap your process, but with the right goals in mind, and use sort of use cases and things of what customers are actually trying to achieve, not what you think they need to kind of step through. So for me, it would be about go back to the beginning and just rip it out and redesign it, would be kind of the golden solution there. But I'm sure there's some.
I think Tracy touched on the key thing is stop talking like a contact center. So actually think about it in terms of what is the customer asking that in their terms. So they don't often think, all right, I want to go through the DPA process so that I can make sure my thing is valid. I want to make sure things are secure, don't they? So they use very simple language. So I think it's understanding it from the customer's viewpoint. Tracy, what would you say to that on any builds?
Rhiannon said something really crucial that I picked up on. Rhiannon, you said, how can we make customers go through that channel? That's the key.
Quite controversial.
Yeah, no, brilliant. It's brilliant that you said that, because it gave me the opportunity to talk about it. But you think about the pandemic as a customer, and of course, so many businesses were thrust into crisis with huge demand on their customer service team. So what they tried to do is they tried to make human beings, as crazy, irrational people, do things that fitted them. So if you then flip it on its head and you go, actually, I'm a customer, I know what I would do. And every single way, and what they normally do is they end up on social media and they go, rah! You know, my daughter was stuck somewhere with LNER, and she got a problem with her rail card, and she tried to ring, because that was the way she was being forced, contact our customer service team. And she went, Mum, I can't get through. And they're telling me to send an email, and I'm stuck on the platform. I don't know what to do because I'm going to get kicked off the train. I went straight onto Twitter and I got an answer straight away. So if you embrace that, then you are so much, it's so much easier, and you can bet your bottom dollar if one person's got that problem, another 10 people have, another 50 people have. So when you're answering it on social media, Other people will be straight onto Twitter, and they'll see the conversations that are happening, like, oh, I've got that problem too. Brilliant. So actually, you're not just responding to one person as you would if you were doing it by email or by phone. You might be responding to 50 people. So it's really, really useful, because actually your Twitter then becomes your FAQs. So if you start with customer needs and you respond to that, yeah, I tell you, it's like trying to change the direction of water. If you try and force customers to do what suits the business, it will always break.
I think we've got time for probably one or two more questions. So I'm going to come to Joe Hall, who had a few questions around making systems user-friendly and data security, which is quite topical. So Joe, do you want to fire your question to one of the panelists?
Yeah, so the business that I work for, financial services, our digital journey is quite new. So, you know, we're very old school in terms of letter contact and telephone contact. So it's how you sort of get through to the customer that the digital journey is a safe option for them. And we do have a lot of older customers as well. So how do you sort of, I don't want to generalize that the older generation can't deal with the digital, but, you know, how do we make it user friendly for anyone really? Just to make sure, because if you're having to click through and through and through, it can get boring. It can, you know, it might put the customer off from using that process. So just an easier way really, just to simplify it, but also, you know, make it robust and secure for that customer in the same way.
How do we have a simple and secure? Yeah, Tracy, go first and then we'll come to Harriet.
Fabulous. So when I talk about, do I like and trust you, do I matter to you, will you make my life better? On the like and trust one, I always talk about two things. One is acknowledgement, one is reassurance. And what's really important for you there is the reassurance. Every step of the way, you are having a conversation, and what you're saying is you're safe, you're safe, you're safe. And so if you, so the first thing is stop talking like a contact center. You may or may not still be doing that. If you are still speaking in a very formal terms, they're less likely to feel comfortable because they feel it's too clunky. And I would recommend everybody Googles the Monzo Bank tone of voice to tell you how to speak like a human. It's fantastic. But for me, reassurance, it's the language you use will change their behavior.
Harriet, how about you from a process perspective? What would you say for Joe on that?
Yeah, so I was going to say about it's all about reassurance, but I think sort of maybe a specific piece of advice if you're worried about people struggling to use your online journey is it's all about giving people options. So one of the things that I absolutely love on an online journey is like maybe tooltips or expandable options. So your journey is slick and clean, and for people who find it intuitive, they don't need to worry about the faff, click, 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 done. But giving someone who is a little bit tentative, a little bit worried, the options of, maybe linked FAQs on the side or tooltips where they can have some help that's in the journey, written in a way that's very conversational, as Tracy said, it's not formal, it's need some help, click here, and kind of providing that support throughout the journey in a way that's optional, so it's not cluttering for everyone, but there if you need a bit of help and guidance on the next step.
Love that tip around Monzo tone of voice as well, Tracy. I think everybody's going to now flood Monzo's live chat to see what happens. We've probably got time for one more question. So we're going to come to Karim.
Hi. Right, so my question is to Tracy, and Harriet, you can answer this as well if you don't mind. We got an online store, and you know what? I'm a kind of person that I like to do a little bit of research. So first thing I did, I completely took off the chat boot from our website, completely did. And you know what? That was a game changer. Because what happened, we have these people coming in and asking us a question. You know what happens when people buy emotionally, right? They don't buy it sensibly, they buy emotionally. Yes, they receive the product and they say, oh, that's not the right fit. Which completely changed it actually. And you know what, since then, we did not even have a one return or any kind of complaint because we start asking questions to people and putting them in the right direction in the first place. Just say, right, this product not gonna work for you because the problem you're trying to achieve is that. And you know what? They just love the full experience. So this is kind of thing that I start researching. And you guys are so right to put the phone number there because you know what? People want to pick a phone and speak to a real human rather than trying to find an answer somewhere in your website, and they literally leave the process because they just. And
if you have it, I'm loving your floating desk, Karim. I don't know if you know you've got a desk that's going up. I know. I love that.
It's actually making me a little bit sick.
I know we've only got 3 minutes. The great thing is that if you open up your phone lines, you really understand whether or not you've got a problem in a different area. So if you shut down your phone lines, you won't be understanding what your customers really need. And you just added the human to it, and that's what you've done. Your passion has really come through, and it worked. Love it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Harriet,
So anything I can improve? Oh, sorry, Harriet. Anything I can improve on?
Stop with that floating desk is probably the key one.
I do it now.
I was on a webinar recently with Karim, and there was a life-size version of him in the background whilst he was actually chatting as well, and that was quite distracting because he had a twin from somewhere. But we are sadly towards the end of today's session, so thank you so much to Tracy and to Harriet for presenting some really awesome information there. We've got some really great tips. And what I want to do off the back of this is just circulate that and kind of pull it all together so that you've got like a little value pack and a value share for some of the information that's been given. So we will share the video, we will share the slide deck, and we will consolidate some of the great stuff that's come out of the chat into the pack. So watch out for your follow-up. There will also be a little free gift courtesy of Harriet coming your way as well. So top tip, open up the email when you see it if you want to take advantage. But yeah, the next session is on the 29th of July. So please don't all take your holiday vacations at once. I know you're itching to, but yeah, 29th of July, and we're going to have the awesome Gavin Scott, who's going to be sharing some top stories and customer service secrets. So this is how to really improve your customer service game in the contact center environment by using things like storytelling and words and language. So it's going to be a really interesting session. And then in August, we've got Paul Banks joining, and we're going to be talking behavioral science and the contact center. So 2 awesome events for you to sign on to. I'll signpost those a little bit later, but thank you all very much for attending today's session. Thanks again to Tracy and Harriet. It's been a really awesome session. I've really enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of your days and have a fantastic weekend this weekend. And thanks very much, everybody, for attending. See you all at the next one.